Coming up today, count your blessings and set your boundaries. Expert advice for handling conflict and protecting your mental health around the Thanksgiving table. Good morning, I'm Jessica Lovell, and welcome to the Morning Medical Update. It's the typical Thanksgiving table talk. Who makes the best sweet potatoes? Is pumpkin pie the best dessert? This year, though, is someone going to slide in a who did you vote for and why? Well, for many of us, the politics have become more and more personal than ever. And while the election is over, you may feel like you're walking on eggshells around those who voted differently. We went out and about and asked people if they plan to talk politics this Thanksgiving.
No, not with family. If we're among friends, generally yes, or it'll come up.
Yeah, I think that there's been people that have said they want to set boundaries. They don't want to go near that. And I personally don't think that's healthy, because I think people need to be able to express themselves and vent and try to work through the situations.
We don't have a rule or anything. If it pops up, then we'll talk about it. But other than that, it's not nothing that's a main agenda that we talk about. We usually just talk about family business.
But I know it's going to be some talk about it.
Why is that?
Because they already been talking about it.
There's separate political views, and it's sort of a mutual respect to just, leave it alone. It's a time to be together and show that you love one another and give thanks. It's not a time to argue or have debates about opposing opinions.
We accept and move on and kind of avoid those topics in some sense, but also if they come up, we listen and understand and hear each other's viewpoints and sometimes agree to disagree, which I think is totally okay.
There's going to be differing opinions, but luckily my family all just, no one's really trying to start a fight, so we can kind of agree to disagree and then move on.
It's going to be lovely. We are going to get together as one, enjoying together.
Perfect.
The election is technically behind us, but those strong personal feelings don't just go away for everyone. Joining us to discuss this are Drs. Jessica Hamilton and Greg Nawalnik. Both are psychologists here at the University of Kansas Health System. Dr. Nawalnik, this has been a repeated theme for the past few elections, as we know. On one hand, people want to gather and be grateful and thankful. You heard a lot of that in the video piece. Yeah. But on the other hand, some people are not happy. There's a lot of animosity, not just post-election, but even just leading up to the election. So I'm going to ask you, how do we cope? And that's a big question. So give us some tools and tactics.
So number one, I've been telling a lot of my patients, because I will admit that in the 2 weeks following the election, I would say around 90% of my sessions have focused in some capacity on the election results. So what I've been trying to explain to them is, if you were on the winning side, then that's great for you, and have those feelings, celebrate it, maybe keep it inside of you, talk to like-minded people about that. But when you have friends or family that were opposing, try to be gracious about it, because remember that just as invested as you were, people on the other side were equally invested and are now very disappointed. And so I think that the biggest challenge here is doubling down on just being you and be the best version of yourself, and try to carry that forward. And if you don't like the way that politics looks and being too nasty and too ugly, then don't try to invite that into your life. Try to find that more positive space where we can engage in constructive discourse around it.
And it's unfortunate, because you did use the term, if you were on the winning side. And it's unfortunate because not until of late have we felt like there's the winners and the losers, and it feels very divisive. We hear the word anxiety a lot, that gets tossed around. But what about this kind of topical anxiety, when you know you're going to be around other people, you're trying to avoid them, and now here's the holidays, it's really hard to avoid. What are some of those symptoms that you might be experiencing, kind of this situational anxiety?
Well, there's always, I think, a certain amount of anxiety around the holidays, because, for adults, especially for parents, you straddle this line between being a parent and an adult in your own home, but then around the holidays you come back to your family of origin where you are still kind of pulled back into being a child. So you're dancing this line where there's a certain amount of respect that you want to have, and you want everything to be just right. Everybody says, I want to be perfect. And while there is no such thing as perfect, I think that what the anxiety looks like is that sort of chaotic sense that everything is swirling around you. You feel that kind of tightness in your chest. heart rate rushing, that kind of sick to your stomach feeling that you get. I think everybody knows what anxiety and how nerves feel. And I think that getting ready for the Thanksgiving dinner, if when you think about it, you get an immediate sinking feeling where you're just like, ooh, that's anxiety.
Not good. Well, and it's really important, though, you said that, the dynamic shifts. I mean, when you're kind of queen of your own castle, and then here come I grew up with my great aunts and my grandma, and everybody comes in, and kind of the dynamic of who you are in the family shifts. Yep. So it's definitely interesting trying to navigate that. And Dr. Hamilton, I mean, we've heard these stories, politics impacting dating, marriages, families. What's your advice for family members when a political argument starts, or you think you're going down that path?
Well, I always say, first, think about why you're going to that family event, because in advance. I have patients right now who have anticipatory anxiety because they know that their political alignment is not in agreement with others in their family. And so there's that anticipation of how am I going to handle that, and the avoidance of wanting to not even go, possibly. I think that I go back to what your values are, and that is you're going to spend time with your family, and the aim is to have a time together with positive interactions for the entire family. So you get to spend time with your great aunt and your grandma that you don't see all the time, right? Where it's more about spending time and focusing on those things and those stories and the history, and finding those things that bring you together to focus on, rather than the things that are going to be pulling you apart.
Feeling like you have to take a stand. I think that's it. You go into, maybe social settings or work settings, you feel like you got to stand up for what you believe in. And you're saying when it comes to family, you got to try to separate it. And I'll be really honest, and I'm throwing my sister under the bus. Hopefully she's at work by now. But she has said this year, she goes, I'm not doing it. I'm not going. Tomorrow we're having our big family, extended family. And she said, I'm not going to go and be around those people. So now we have these people and those people. And I said, part of me said, I get it. But then I lean on the side of where you said, I was like, can you just give it a couple of hours, table it, and just see the good? Because there's a lot there.
Yeah.
But it's tough. That guy mentioned in the piece, hey, set boundaries. And you were like, good. And then he goes, but I don't think that's a great idea to set boundaries. Clearly you do. What boundaries can we set in place when we want to try and have civil conversations? I want to hear from both of you.
I mean, I think that you can only set boundaries with yourself. You can attempt to set a boundary with the family and have that education and commentary beforehand. You can also try to plan for topics if you're hosting of let's redirect things back to, family vacation that we're planning, or what happened 2 years ago at Christmas, or something funny from way back when, right? So setting an agenda, if you will, or activities like Monopoly or whatever that activity might be. The other thing is just then going back to yourself and saying I don't have to participate in those conversations if I don't want to. I can excuse myself. I can just be there. And if you want to engage, I would say engaging in a way that is true to the kind of person that you want to be. Are you wanting to be right as far as politics go, or do you want to be understanding and recognize that there's a difference and be respectful? So just kind of thinking about it from that point of view.
Dr. Hamilton, that's the perfect world. That sounds like such a great idea. It's tough. I was sitting there listening going, okay, I get that. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be good? I don't know. I haven't decided yet, but what do you think? What are some boundaries?
Well, so I think that there's a couple ways to think about this, which is that if it does tend to go that way, I mean, like Dr. Hamilton said, that if you come together for the holidays, the most valuable part of that is looking around the table and seeing everybody there exactly as they are this year, because they will never be that way again. Kids are going to get older. Grandparents may not be with us next year. Yeah. You never know. So do you want to look back on this Thanksgiving and think it was such a nice, lovely family time together and a great meal? Or do you want to remember, I burned her with that comment. When I said that, she felt it. I was right. I got it. That's just.
But what do you say about people like my sister who says, I don't want to go because I feel like I'm not being genuine to who I am. I feel like I'm giving my time. She'd rather watch the Jayhawks play. She said, I'd rather watch the Jayhawks play than go and sit with people that I don't agree with?
It's you know, it's going to be a personal choice, but it's a risk versus reward.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to reward yourself in the short term by having peace and being out of it. But how's the next day feel when everybody's talking about their Thanksgiving at work and they're like, what'd you do? Well, I watched the Jayhawks. Yeah, so did we. All of my family was together. We had people in from out of town. It was really great. And it's like, you know, and then if somebody has a, you know, an aneurysm and winds up in the hospital, it's like, oh, I didn't get to see them before they became aphasia and couldn't speak. You know, so
And it's,
like,
and it's unfortunate that this holiday is coming so close to the election. I mean, it's just it's not a lot of time to come down from it.
it always does. I mean, Thanksgiving is always like
It's just-
November.
it's
Like,
not a great. It's
yeah.
like here we come right out of it
But-
and then into being grateful and thankful for each other,
If
even
we
though
want
we
to make
don't
it really
agree.
sporting, let's do the second Thursday Thanksgiving.
Yeah, every 4
right?
years.
Bam,
Every 4 years, can we
it's-
push Thanksgiving out?
It's like the,
Pushing for now?
Yeah, it's like the purge. You know, just go family thinning. You know?
Well, I mean, I don't know how you guys are. I definitely in our family, there's a lot of mixed views and people on both sides. I don't know how you all are in your families, but how do you navigate conversations, or do you avoid them when it comes to different views?
I have taken the path personally of trying to go the high road.
Really?
Yeah,
You?
I actually
I love
the day after the election, I called my parents and congratulated them, and you know, my dad acted in a very specific manner that I might not discuss here, but it was not the way that I would advise any patient of mine or anybody at all to act, and I had to really sit with that and just swallow it and say, okay, you know, I understand that he spends the majority of his time on an iPad, on a phone, with this message just coming again and again and again. And I think we have to understand that, you know, this was such a divisive election because of the influence of social media that's, I hate to use the term unprecedented because, God, we do it all the time. But I think we've integrated technology at a level now that this is the first election where podcasts and, you know, and social media really had a substantial influence in a way that we've never seen before. And so we have to understand that when we go into these conversations, there's been an echo chamber that is so reinforced and impregnable that we're trying to bring an alternate perspective, and you think you're going to get through. So you hope that you can touch on the family connection, have the relationship, and express, look, I'm not mad at you, and I'm not running for anything. I'm just, you know, and you can explain, the reason I'm on this side is that it serves me and my family. And for whatever's serving you, you know, I hope that it really works out. And we can't, I don't want anybody to get to the point where we're hoping for America to fail just because your candidate didn't win. We have to hope and recognize that we're all together, and whatever happens, it happens to all of us. So let's hope that behind the rhetoric and all the grand showmanship for the election, that there's actually some productive hope and some goals, and let's try to connect around that.
That's a really good message. I like that. Dr. Hamilton, I mean, should we be communicating ahead of time? Do you think it's that, is it going to be one of those holidays where we need to communicate ahead, just no politics, you know?
I really feel like that's up to the families. My family, unlike Dr. Nawalnik's, we all pretty much are going to be falling in that same category, so there's not a lot of tension. I don't have, thankfully, but I know that situation is incredibly common, and so figuring out that partisanship, that polarization, that media that has come into place, if that is something that you as a host particularly are managing, it is okay to say, in my house, this is what I would really encourage us not to talk about, and these are some of the things that I would encourage us to talk about.
Like as a host,
As
my
the
home,
host.
I'm going to set the tone ahead of time.
I had kind of a fun idea that I thought of while preparing for this chat, and I'm going to throw it out there. But I kind of think that if you've got, especially if you have little kids at the dinner, you know, you can almost make it fun ahead of time, where you institute like a rule that's like the turkey trot. So that, like, if somebody wants to bring up politics, everybody says turkey, and then they have to literally run a lap around the house or around the block or whatever. And that's going to let them calm down because they're going to get away from the situation. They can have their little alone time where they can celebrate their candidate and then come back. And it's kind of funny because everybody's like, you know, so it's like, you know, why not try the turkey trot? We have to be creative.
It's like putting the money in the cuss jar.
Yeah, it's like,
That's exactly what I was
it's
thinking.
like let's find a way to make it fun where everybody, it takes the air out of the, you know, instead of it just like dividing, and somebody says it, it's like,
Somebody says a snide comment.
Can
It's like,
you
you know.
pass the mashed potatoes, please? Like, But I think that that's sort of a creative, possible way that you can go about it. That way, and after you've eaten enough, you sure don't want to go for a jog anywhere. So you're going to maybe avoid it.
Well, and Dr. Hamilton, but what do you think is driving these deep, deep emotions? And Dr. Nawalnik, you mentioned it, you got into it, but I'd like to hear just what you're thinking about as far as there are some people who can go, you know what, I'm going to set this aside, and do right by the holiday. But some people just really are struggling. You said a lot of your clients and patients come in and really are struggling, and so again, because it's different. Let's just be honest, it's different this time. So. So what do you think? What advice do you have for people like that who are struggling in that area?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with some of the social media and how much they've consumed, and then the investment that they have made, both from their time as well as their opinion and their value and whatever their political alignment might be. And so then you have disappointment and or you have victory, and it's almost like sportsmanship that comes down into play of like, how can we figure out how to be good sports and appreciate one another? I mean, we teach our kids this. Why are we not displaying that as adults? I have the same thing that Dr. Nawalnik has with a lot of our patients are struggling for a lot of different reasons. And figuring out really how to support them in what might be grief because of how they interpret the election results, and or helping them identify how they can be supportive and or excited and celebratory if that's the side that they were on, in a respectful way.
Yeah, it's like people just crashed. Like you said, they come up this high, real high, and now it's a real, real low. Be sure to ask your questions. You may have some. You can use the chat on YouTube or Facebook. You can email the Medical News Network. The information is there on your screen. Have you heard about people wanting to end relationships with family and friends? Hard to imagine, it's hard to imagine, but I know this has been swirling around for some people. What kind of advice and conversations are you having with those folks?
I mean, I think that related to politics, it's really hard for us to say, oh, you definitely shouldn't end a relationship, or I think it comes back to like refocusing and saying like, this isn't about politics necessarily, it's about your values. And if somebody is going to hurt you because of the disalignment, are your interactions filling your cup up? Are you actually having a rewarding relationship with that person, or is it taking away from you? And that's over the course of time, not over the course of the last 6 months or year. Like looking at the dynamics of that relationship. And relationships are fluid. Like how many of us still have best friends from high school? I have one or two. Sorry, Emily. Want to make sure that
She wouldn't know she was the one.
That's true. I just totally called myself out.
Yep. Emily, we're all friends.
Yeah,
that's all right.
So anyway, I'm just saying, they all transition over time. So it may be that you need to take a step away, but don't close the door, because in 6 months, in 2 years, when something else happens, perspectives change. What our views can change, and how we want to spend time and the value of family can change too.
What do you think?
I mean, I think that it's just about the relationship ending.
Yeah, and just ending relationships over politics.
I mean, I think that that if you're considering ending the relationship because of the politics, it's probably less about the politics and more about personality attributes and the way that they've gone about.
Because those things were always there before the election.
Yeah.
This is just more of a black and white way of looking at it.
But I think that with the division, that if you've got two different relationship partners, their algorithms can be diametrically opposed. And I think it's important to recognize, like, hey, what if we took a break from social media and tried to give this another go?
Yeah.
Could that maybe help us actually reconnect as two people instead of two algorithms that are mutually exclusive and divisive?
And so much of it is being communicated through social media, messages on Facebook, using texts, like not having face-to-face interactions and like being able to like reciprocate respect between one another. It's a lot easier to say something nasty in a text or email or social media than it is in a face-to-face conversation.
And that's the thing. For a lot of people that have engaged in their political discourse online, it's important to recognize that that is a different vehicle than the Thanksgiving dinner table. And if you try to talk or communicate at your dinner table the way you're doing it online, if you're one of those little snipers who just wants to nail you with something, cry, like, let's not do that. Can we rise up? Can we try to be better? Because ultimately we are all on the same team. Like, we have to kind of think about policy and stuff is the play that we're running, but we're all on the same team. So do we want to tear everything down because we're trying a different offense?
Do you think Thanksgiving and that time could be a good time to seek to kind of understand where people are coming from? There's maybe a different tone in the room. You're trying to be grateful. Do you think it's a good time?
It can be, with alcohol being limited.
Got it.
I'm
Yeah,
just going to
that's
put
fair.
that straight out there because.
Well, one gentleman in the piece said, he's like, hey, we think it's respectful to hear each other's opinions and thoughts. And I mean, I'm sure some families can do that constructively, but what would your advice be for opening up that can of worms?
Yeah, any substances needs to be managed.
Limited.
Also,
Yeah.
coming in, recognizing that all of us at the holiday season can have a higher level of stress, and so managing yourself. And I think if you're going to engage in those conversations, being able to validate the other side of it by even saying, it sounds like this is something that's important to you. Thank you for sharing that. I may not have that same opinion, and that's okay. And if you don't feel like you can handle that, then don't engage in that conversation.
Yeah. And similarly, I think snack before you go over. And what I mean by that is, like, if you're going into a Thanksgiving that starts at 4 and you eat at like 11 for something, or maybe 12, that's 4 hours. You're going to be pretty hungry when you get there.
So there's you're hangry.
And you're hangry, yeah. And hanger is a real thing. So I want to try to discourage two things that will help diffuse the bomb as easily as possible, which is eat a little snack before so you're not really hungry and get hangry, and limit the alcohol consumption, because both these things can take someone that could have a rational discussion, but it turns them into that fight or flight bear that nobody wants to go up against.
Should anybody get up and just leave the table or leave the gathering for their mental well-being? Do you ever suggest that in maybe a kind, quiet way?
I absolutely do. Like,
Okay.
if you're escalating and you can feel that within yourself, stepping aside, doing the turkey trot, whatever, like, do whatever it is. The other thing that can be helpful, and I suggest to people, is make sure that you have an ally. If you need to take a break and you need to just vent to somebody, you can call them on the phone. Know that you have that friend, like phone a friend situation, to just vent, de-escalate, and then come back. Exercise is another great strategy. So either way, just know that you have some type of plan in place for yourself. It can help you also going in, because you have a little bit more security in knowing that there's a plan.
And I would like to think that, and I want to talk about kids, because we all have young kids, and you'd like to think that they're kind of the buffer. A lot of these conversations can be pretty nasty or hateful, and lots of different ages involved. How do we have these conversations with kids around, or how do we diffuse that when the kids are around?
I would honestly try not to.
Yeah.
And I also think that kids want to be part of stuff, and so they have likely overheard a lot of political talk.
Yeah.
So sometimes they may be the loose cannon.
Yeah.
They might be the one at the table that says,
Yeah.
America's so great. I'm so great. I'm grateful for Trump or whatever. And then somebody's like, Jimmy, we talked about this too.
Right.
So they might accidentally dive in, and then that's where the turkey trot's fun. It's like, Timmy, trot.
And if I had a diver every time I hear my kids go and hang out with my mother, and then they come back over and go, Mom, why does Grandma hate so and so? And I'm just like left. It's like I'd rather my kids ask me where babies come from than Mom, why? It's like I don't know how to explain why Grandma hates some random person she's never met. I don't know. And so how do we help our kids not? Because I always say these are the adults that are going to eventually be sitting around this Thanksgiving table, and you're setting the example.
Well, I think you're speaking to what a lot of concern around the campaign was that a lot of the things that were being said out loud in the campaign were things that we would discourage our kids from ever saying or acting like.
Right.
And so I think that maybe the kids can be the lens through which we really need to consider how we talk about this stuff, just in general. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, mine are a little bit older, and they did an election at the middle school, and
Yep, they do that.
And my kids had opposing sides, And I was like,
boy.
what is happening? Nobody is communicating this to you. So we've had to have like some conversations about why is it that you are doing this or thinking this way, and friends and social media and who they hang out with at school. I mean, like, so it's not just adults, like kids, and then their parents all come back.
It's all a thing.
And so then it can also be an opportunity for good conversations, even though it's uncomfortable and you would rather talk about how babies were made. Still can be a really good opportunity of doing some basic education on topics that we may not have otherwise been
about being respectful, and that people have different thoughts and opinions, and
Yes.
you know, to learn, ask questions and learn why somebody feels the way they do. Let's see what our audience wants to know this morning, shall we? Let's just jump right into this. You'll love this one. Alexis says, my dad always said, quote, do you want to figure out a way to get through this, or do you want to die alone? So that's kind of the way, like, do you want to do this, or do you want to like run your entire family out of town, right? So
I think that goes to like that idea of like, why are we coming to Thanksgiving? Do you want to be right and divisive and try to change other people's opinions? Or do you want to have a family? Do you want to have your support group, and figuring out that it's okay to have differing opinions?
Well, exactly. I mean, families are families. They are who they are. And
Right.
It's not like you're picking them. They are who they are. And all across town, everybody's got someone at the table that, you know, that they're struggling with. So it is what it is. Okay, Nate says, how do we handle situations when we have loved ones who feel it's more about morals and less about politics? You mentioned that a little bit, but dive back into that a bit.
I mean, I feel like when you think about politics, a lot of the things that were being communicated through the media were also secondarily related to values that people hold. So it can get really emotionally eliciting, if that makes sense. Like, we can become very ingrained in those opinions because they're so important to us, where politics are not supposed to be our value system.
Right.
And so there is a difference, but we can get really protective of our values and want to stand up for them. And that makes it really difficult for us to be understanding of other people's opinions and politics.
And sorry if I can jump in, along that line, a little psychoeducation around our brain and how it works. When we get nervous, when we get upset, or when we get angry, our prefrontal cortex, the front part of our brain, the part that makes us adults, goes offline.
Yeah.
And so what we lose in that is the ability, some really key abilities to have these discussions. Emotion regulation, impulse control, delayed gratification, linking behaviors with consequences. When those things come off the table, we're in a really precarious space. And so the way to get that back on board is take a good deep breath, which is diaphragmatic breathing, a good deep breath where your belly goes out. I know it's 2024, we're all beautiful babies, we don't have bellies, but let your stomach go out. That lets you know you're getting a good oxygenated breath. Hold your breath for a 4 or 5 count, slowly exhale. So anytime somebody says something that triggers you and you feel that, just take a deep breath before you respond and think about what's gonna come out of what I'm about to say.
Jeremy says, I think people tend to wrap their politics up as if it's part of their identity. And that's a very good way of putting it. But as their core, they're just topics and then opinions on what to do about those topics. But the people we love are still the same people they were before this election, and trying to kind of see it in a different light. Joellen wants to know just how much pressure this can put on a host. I mean, and just what, I mean, I know when I'm hosting something, I'm off the charts anyway on the best day of the year, let alone on a day where you've got all these people coming and you got politics.
Yeah.
Any suggestions?
Self-care, leading up and during. I know myself as a host, I know that I have to be very thoughtful at how much I'm doing each day in preparation. I can't just expect it all to happen naturally. So planning ahead, communicating things ahead. If you're going to set boundaries, create the games, have the activities.
Deflect,
have
distractions.
Know how, like in advance, like know that you have a game plan. Don't go in unprepared.
And wine is not adaptive coping. It's just not. So like if you're making the turkey and a little wine for the stuff and a little wine for me.
Okay.
And
I'll write that down. That's a good suggestion for my sister.
Try to keep that keep that
at a minimum.
down. Yeah.
Jill wants to know, how do you solve the stress around the election impacting people who are sick or are fighting some type of illness? I mean, it's just like compacting stress on top of stress. And
so for my patients, I think that some of it comes back to, because I work with complex medical patients, right, with lots of different types of health issues, and one of the things that they have a lot of concerns about is insurance and what their coverages are going to be and how things may or may not change. And so they have a lot of anticipatory anxiety that is just compounding the political stress, as well as compounding their medical conditions, because it actually can impact their health. Stress is not a great thing for any type of medical condition. It impacts our cortisol level, it impacts our autoimmune response, and it can actually have negative impacts. So if you are dealing with those types of things, removing politics to the best of your ability, or figuring out the balance that you can ingest. So I always talk about, like, if you're spending 2 hours watching a news show, is that healthy time for you? Right? Like, maybe it's a 10-minute read of an article, or 30 minutes, or figuring that balance out for you, as well as engaging in other behaviors that are going to be healthy and decrease the stress that you are carrying on a day-to-day basis.
Well, and it's also a good time to realize that people are going through other things. And when we get around the Thanksgiving table, sometimes it's like, I know it's been a lot, we all kind of have this common ground of frustration and heightened anxiety, but what's going on with you? You know, there's so many other things that people have going on that need to be asked about and cared about and
supported.
And maybe we kind of take that surface election politics and go a little deeper and check in on each other, especially when it comes to mental health. What do you think the biggest takeaway today? You know, it's going to be a week, you know, of getting together with family. What do you want people to really, really hone in on?
Oh, me first?
Yeah, let's do it. You go.
You know, I think that what we should be looking to take away is the reason that we're coming together. This is Thanksgiving. I mean, you know, if you want to, you know, try to have a political discussion, there's 364 other days of the year for that. Let's try to keep it above the ground and recognize that there's a reason we come together, and it's to be grateful, to think about what are the things that are the blessings in our life, and hopefully it's the people at the table and the food that we have to eat, and that there's no need to talk about how much the turkey cost this year, that there's no need to get into, well, you didn't make this year. You know, let's try to find what we actually have, find the common ground, come together in the spirit of love and connection. And you know, also maybe take a little moment to be grateful to the indigenous people that are the sole reason that we are still able to be in this great land. And a moment of thought and gratitude and you know, connection, and if your spiritual prayer, you know, coming together and letting people go around the table and knowing that some people get really anxious about having to say. So, you know, people like, what are you thankful for? Maybe just say, you know what, as a host or hostess, I'd love everybody to put in your mind what's something you're grateful for, and then if you're willing to share or comfortable sharing, you can let us know. That way you're not putting anybody to single them out and creating more anxiety. So we want to try to make this as light, as fun, and as loving as we can.
And it's one day. I like what you're saying. There's plenty of other days to have for conflict. Let's have one day where we're just
like,
grateful.
With all due respect to dentists, like a dental visit is a time-limited situation. You just sit through it and you get it done, you get out. Same Thanksgiving.
Just get in and get out, and try to find some sort of peace about it. Dr. Hamilton, what do you want people to really?
I mean, I would
away?
echo everything that Dr. Nawalnik just said. I mean, the idea is Thanksgiving, so giving thanks for and finding those positives rather than looking for those negatives, and just having that mindset, being able to share that time and appreciate the people that you have in your circle, right? The people that you are joining with, your family. And finding those things that you can look forward to with them, rather than the things that may separate you.
Really great discussion. Thank you. Have a good holiday.
Turkey trot.
Turkey trot, baby. I love it. I love it. All right. Thanks for being with us today. Thanks to our viewers. We hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday. Coming up Monday on the Morning Medical Update. Millions are eligible for this cancer screening, but only a fraction take advantage. Why not catch lung cancer early and increase the odds of survival? I'm Jessica Lovell on the next Morning Medical Update. Meet someone who did not meet the guidelines, but is glad she insisted on a low-dose lung scan. Monday at 8.
Subscribe to our Morning Medical Update and Open Mics with Dr. Stites podcast. Now everywhere podcasts are available.